Hello and welcome to the Ohio Developmental Disability Profile Training. My name is Brian Harrigan with the department, one of the Medicaid field consultants. Also on the line are
Rick Donnelly.
And today we're going to go ahead and do the video portion of the ODDP training. You can see we have a new agenda for the training in total, and part of it will be this video training or this webinar training, which will go through the background and clinical assessment process, and we'll have an example video. Then you will in person see or train the trainer, our regional trainer that we have trained, to present the case studies, an overview of the instructions, and then present the competency tests. Those tests will be sent or submitted to the department, the answer sheets, and we will grade them and respond to whether you're authorized or if you have to retest. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the DDP training, and we can talk a little bit more about the goals of this training. The goals, of course, are to make sure we have authorized assessors who are reliable, which means consistently across the state we can say everybody's been trained the same, they have the same information, we can verify they've met the same accuracy as regarding testing procedures, and we can say with confidence to CMS that this is a statewide system and we are in fact implementing it with a statewide standard. The objectives of the training, again, we want each of the participants, each of the assessors that we're training today, to be successful when they become authorized to administer the DDP. And to do that, we want to make sure that you have the ability, you need to accurately complete the tool. We're going to review some 4 key points of assessments that are valid for completing the tool. And we want you to be familiar with the tool and be able to basically feel comfortable with it so that you can get the correct information and you know a little bit more about the tool to be able to make sure you're answering things correctly. A little bit about the DDP. We're going to say this probably more than once in this training, and I expect the trainers to say it when you're in person with them. The DDP is not a comprehensive assessment tool. When we use this in the clinical assessment model, it is not comprehensive in the sense that it is designed to cover all aspects of the person's life, and once you complete the DDP, you will have all the information you need to complete an ISP. That's not true. The DDP simply looks at a subset of information about the person's needs and circumstances to determine what we believe the funding range should be to have this individual's needs met. We do want to stress that the information should not conflict with what you have in the ISP. So if you see something in the DDP that indicates this person does not have any mobility issues, yet in the ISP you're writing something about they have issues ambulating, then that shouldn't be the case. The information should agree with each other and should not be in conflict. Once the DDP is submitted, you're assigned a score that corresponds to the person's circumstances and says, here's what we believe you can have your needs met within this funding range. The DDP is a standardized instrument. We need to make sure it was statewide, so we have to make sure that it's standardized and used appropriately throughout the state in the same manner. So you do compare these circumstances. You can compare them with other people who have the same answers, and they should be scored the same. There is that assumption that if people look the same and they're in different parts of the state, that they will score within the same range, within the same funding range, and that is how we go by saying, yeah, this is statewide. Because previously in the past, when we've been audited by CMS, we had people who looked very similar in nature, had the same needs, yet one person had a very high amount of funding and another one person had a very low amount. And they said this isn't statewide. So we have to verify that things are statewide for this waiver because this is a statewide opportunity. This information is included in the rule reference there, 5123-2906, which is the waiver reimbursement methodology. So if you're wanting to know what rule there is to verify that the DDP is required, that would be the rule that you would look for. So why are you being trained? Again, we wanted to say that DDP trainers, they have been authorized by us. We can set a standard and verify that everybody who's been trained meets that same standard and make sure that it's consistent and accurate across the state so that we can verify that it is, in fact, statewide. Again, the DDP is an assessment tool that is, we need to make sure that there's a consistent understanding of this tool and this consistent understanding of the focus of the question. So, in other words, we want to make sure that people understand when we ask this question what you're trying to get out and how to make sure that we can answer this assessment question correctly and where to get the information from and what all can be used. I'm going to call this out again. We're going to probably sometimes hear people say there's DDP world and there's a real world. Some definitions and terms in the DDP are not used in the same way in our other rules, and you may not expect them to be worded the same in the ISP. First example of this is the medication administration. Under our rule, medication administration, we have like self-administer with assistance. DDP doesn't have that term. DDP says, are they total support, assistance, and independent? And those definitions are different than what we would expect to see in our ISP. So please don't confuse terminology in the DDP with the real world, and make sure that if you question what the DDP is asking regarding independent or assistance, use the legends that are in the DDP itself to make that determination. So you may need to kind of shift some of your thought process to say, oh, I thought this was like total support over here. Well, it may not mean over here. It depends on what the definition is, according to the DDP, that is. The assessor, of course, you have a significant role in making sure that we obtain these results and make sure that the results are accurate. And so that's why we're training you and trying to get you to understand these little intricacies of the DDP itself. Okay. Who is required to have a DDP? Anybody who's on the IO waiver, the home and community-based IO waiver. Now, you don't need one for the level 1 because right now the level 1 is a set funding range. And if we develop any other waivers to be administered by the department, at that time we will have to determine whether that waiver would need the DDP or not. But currently, all IO waiver enrollees are required to have a DDP. That doesn't mean other people can't have the assessment done. If it's done ahead of time, there's no harm. But there must be a DDP in place before the person can start their IO waiver services. The DDP has been around since 7105, so anybody who was enrolled at that time and since then should have a DDP in place if they were enrolled on the IO waiver. Again, the resulting funding range simply points you to a funding range, and we're trying to assist the individual and the team, his circle of supports, to understand that we believe that this is the funding range you can have your needs met in. When would you redo the DDP? Well, anytime there's a change in life circumstances. So anytime that you may have a change in someone's functionality, whether they're, say, I now have a severe health injury or status, so now I am going to go ahead and need assistance ambulating to say I broke a leg. That would be a need to go ahead and revise the DDP. My level of independence has changed. Change in natural supports or voluntary caregiving, because now I don't have some of that additional support from the outside. I'm moving from one home to another, and the makeup is different. I used to be living with one person, now I'm living with 3. All those things would trigger that. But those are not just examples. Any time that you think there's been a life change, significant life change, that would change some of the answers in the DDP, I would suggest at least reviewing the DDP to make sure the answers are correct, and possibly recompleting it. Told you we talk about the clinical assessment process and how it pertains to the DDP. So here are the 4 main keys in what we consider the clinical assessment process. They're the assessor, the information, process, and tool. Under that, the assessor, you're here today so we can make sure that you're trained. We want you to be knowledgeable of the tool. We are going to give you some tips on being prepared to complete the assessment. We want you to be able to ask questions and know how to ask questions of the individuals. We want you to have, again, effective communication skills. Part of the setup, we're talking about reviewing files. So you're going to review ISP, medical records, other evaluations and assessment that have information on this regarding this individual, and their medical or abilities, anything that you can see for history and gives you a clearer picture of the individual. You're also going to want to do an interview, and the person should be involved, and the people who know that individual best should be involved. That is part of, you're going to have to find that out as part of the setup. Make sure you invite those people. We're talking about family members, guardians, providers, those people who actually work with the individual, who know that individual, and can answer these questions. More than one person can be present. We suggest that you make sure that the location of the interview is someplace that the individual is comfortable with, and that it is at a time that's convenient for them and for the rest of the members who will be attending. One of the things we suggest, as part of this preparation, is to have a little bit of a toolkit. And in the toolkit, we have a list of some things that will be helpful. And I think as you go through, and if you see we have a video a little later on, you can see where some of these things can come into play and can be very helpful in getting questions answered. And you can have the individual use these items to help answer different questions that you may have and complete the tool so that you can have that answer. Again, the assessor, when you would conduct the interview, we expect you to establish a rapport. We want you to understand the individual, explain to them, here's what the process is, here's your rights, here's my rights, highlight sections and types of questions that, are going to be very important. Maybe explain some of them, that tell them we have to answer all these questions. Just because I'm asking you this doesn't mean that I believe that you would do these types of things, especially under the behavior section. Explain the need for accurate responses. We do expect you to proceed through the assessment sequentially. Not that once you are done you can't go back and review things again, but if you go through sequentially, we believe it will save you time. And as you may see later in some of the video, some questions work in a progression. So if you answer one in one section later on when it is similar, you may have already essentially asked the same question or seen a demonstration that would answer this question that happens later in the tool. Again, we expect you to probe for understanding when you aren't sure that you have the correct answer. So if you don't think that the answer that you received quite matches up, do follow-up questions. Use some observation. Ask some people to go ahead and demonstrate their ability. That all can be used in determining the level of, or the answer for the DDP. Now, we want to take a quick break and do part of a video for you that's going to basically going to show you some of the things that we expect the assessor to do, and it's going to be an ideal type of situation for the assessment. Rick, would you want to go ahead and introduce the video for me, please?
Certainly. The first video segment that you're going to be watching, as Brian referenced, is basically where the assessor talks to the individual, makes them aware of their respective rights as a participant, and also the rights and responsibilities that the assessor has in conducting the assessment itself, and also for any other participants that might be there to assist the individual with answering those questions.
And the only other thing I would like to add is that this video was done several years ago and expressly for the purposes of this training. Please, to respect the rights and the purpose of this video, do not use this video for any other purpose than this training. We have an individual who volunteered for this, and we would like to respect their right to use it in the spirit in which they permitted us to. And with that, we'll move on to the video.
And the first thing is the rights and responsibilities. Those are rights and responsibilities that apply to me because I'm completing the assessment today, and they apply to you because you're the individual or the person who's actually having an assessment done. I've given copies to Sadie and Joellen because they're going to be helping us complete the tool today. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me quickly run through the rights and responsibilities before we get started. It's the first sheet you have there. And first we start off with the rights and responsibilities for you, John. And the first responsibility is really to have a DDP completed. That helps us to understand exactly what types of waiver funding we can help you with. And the second right is the right to participate in the assessment interview. And that's the interview that we're doing here today. And then the next right is to waive participation in the assessment interview. And John, this is a really important one. I want you to understand that if at any time during this whole interview process you feel uncomfortable or you'd like to stop for any reason, to take a break, or maybe to stop for the day and come back another time, or we could finish it with Sadie or Joellen or other people who know you well. And that's an important one. I want you to be able to feel free to stop me if any time you want to, okay?
Okay.
Is that okay? All right. The next one is if you decide that you want to stop, we'll just write that down on the tool itself today. The next one is identifying people who can help us fill out the assessment. And you've brought with you today Sadie and Joellen, so they'll help us out. And I understand that there may be people back home who couldn't come today, maybe your mom or your niece, who may also help to fill in the assessment if we have questions.
Your sister.
Uh-huh, Peggy.
And your sister? Okay. We'll be sure to capture that when we go through the assessment. And then the last right that you have listed here on this page, John, is the right to receive a copy of the completed DDP tool and the results once they're done. So I'll take all of the answers that I collect here today in this meeting, and I'll go ahead and I'll put them into my computer, and I'll be able to print out a clean copy for you that has all of the answers that pertain to your life. Is that all right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Next thing are my rights and responsibilities as the person completing the assessment. And the first one is that I need to obtain the most accurate information about you. And this is through the interview process, and this is also through a review of some of the case record information about you. The next one is to explain the rights and responsibilities, just like I'm doing right now, for both you and for me. The other one is the responsibility to invite your guardian or other people who know you well to participate if you'd like. The next important one is that I can't answer any question on this tool without supporting evidence. And by that, I mean I can't answer a question that I think I know the answer to without talking to you and to the people here that are here to help us. And also maybe, if we need to, if we can't remember something, maybe looking in your case record file. And then the last one is that I have the responsibility and the right to use professional judgment to complete the tool. I've gone through a training and a certification about the assessment process, and those are the rights and responsibilities for the ODDP. Do you have any questions before we start?
Nope.
No? Sadie? Joellen? Okay. Well, the next
Okay. Hopefully you've viewed the video for the an opening assessment where you see that the assessor introduced the terms of who has what rights and responsibilities and starts to develop the rapport. This is one of the things we expect the staff to do, or the assessor to do with the individual. Be familiar with the people and the names and the terms in the assessment. Help the individual understand what these terms really mean for them. We will expect you to direct questions to the individual or other participants and try to get the correct answer. You may need to reword them, paraphrase them, explain them a little bit. Okay? You may need to, if you're getting off track, change topics verbally. Try to keep things moving along. We do not expect the assessor to negotiate answers. The DDP has the answer to a multiple choice kind of answer. You pick the most appropriate one. You use your professional judgment based on all the information that you have. This isn't a matter of, I want that answer because I believe it's going to give me increased funding range. That's not what this process is about. The process is to give us correct answers. You get a funding range, and then if you cannot get your needs met within the funding range, then we talk about prior auth. So this is not an issue where we negotiate answers. We do expect you to use professional judgment. The other reason we don't want to negotiate answers is we do use the data that we get from the DDP for other purposes, such as developing future waiver services or looking at the types of supports that a person may need when they're in a certain range, and we have to validate against prior auth to try to figure out where the DDP may or may not be accurately capturing some circumstances. Also, as an assessor, we expect you to pay attention to nonverbal communication as well as verbal communication. And hopefully, as most of you are SSAs or work in the field with the individuals, hopefully you are already aware of those type of nonverbal communications that you probably see or interact with the individuals with on a routine basis. Again, the assessor, you're going to want to follow up. Like I said, we don't negotiate answers, but if you're not sure, you look at additional information. You look back for additional reviews. If you need to have another assessment done, you may need to see about, what kind of assessment do we have to have done to verify this, if, we can't determine one way or the other. That assessment, again, will also be something you would need to use in your ISP, so you're not really losing any ground on this one. It's one of those things, if you need the assessment, hopefully it's for the purpose of deciding what needs the individual actually has. We've talked about your professional judgment. We're going to reiterate it. We expect you to make your professional judgment and decide on which answers is correct and all throughout the DDP. If anybody would ask you why you chose what you chose, I would expect you to be able to answer that. And hopefully, when you do that, you would be able to go ahead and also go ahead and be able to write down anything that you think is maybe questionable, so that should somebody ask in the future, you can return to that and answer that. And worst comes to worst with this tool, it's not written in stone. You can always go back and redo this. Okay? Again, you'll recalculate these things online, and you'll get the score. It'll tell you the funding range. You move forward from there. The information, it primarily comes from the individual, people who know them, and case record, other assessments. That's what we want you to review. You also have to make some professional judgment on whether those resources are, in fact, reliable. So you want to pick and choose which information to use based on its reliability, and use that as for your answer. When we say that we expect the information to be comprehensive, we're not saying that we need to know everything about the individual. We expect you to say, I'm answering this question, and here's the information I'm trying to get. So I expect the information to be comprehensive for that question, to cover that subject. So I'm going to review all information for that subject to accurately answer that question. We expect the process to focus on the individual is because it's their assessment. Again, we expect you to go and be thorough and answer each question and get all the information to make sure that you do a good job, comprehensive job of answering each question. Involve those who know the information because that's where you're going to get it. Don't make assumptions. Try to back up any answer that you have based on something that is either written or some other kind of assessment. The tool, the DDP tool, has been tested for reliability and consistency, and it has been in use for several years. So we do know that people with similar needs do score the same on this tool. If someone does not have enough funding range to meet their assessed needs from the ISP, that is when we talk about prior auth. So if somebody isn't, then we at the department want some additional oversight so that if somebody can't get their needs met, then you're going to be submitting something to the prior auth area so that they can review that, to feel that they can justify that for any time that we would be audited, and they would ask questions about our process, be it JFS or CMS, the Federal Centers for Medicaid. And we can also say that our tool here is designed for predictability because we verified that. Let's move on to an overview of the assessment tool. Like we said, it captures current circumstances. It doesn't capture everything. We would expect you to use your professional judgment when answering a question, but if you really can't decide between two answers, we would expect you to err on the side of caution and then choose the answer which indicates a greater level of support. That being said, that will hopefully save you time in the future, because if you indicate the greater level of support, then you're not having a prior auth for something that, may be simply you change the answer for the DDP, and because if you pick too low, you're going to end up possibly going into prior auth sooner. Okay, so we would expect that to be what you would do. When you enter everything into the online application, you're going to have to make sure that you save by section. You're going to have to make sure that saving is not equal to submitting. We try to make it user-friendly. We believe that it is simply the tool, the paper tool that you will see in front of you, with each page being a different page on the website. So we do go ahead and we would go ahead and expect you to page through that, answer sections, save, submit on the submit page. You can use the navigation buttons to get from page to page. Once you complete all the fields you submit, if you try to submit without completing all the fields, it will tell you. You also have the option for a button to score before submitting, so that will check to make sure you've answered all the questions before you try to submit, and will also tell you a funding range before you submit if you are questioning what the funding range might be before you officially submit the DDP. To get access, you're going to have a security affidavit. You're going to have to be able to get that signed by your county board superintendent or designee, and it will show up in your applications just like IDS. If anybody else who has access to anything within the department's online portal. It would show up there as an option under, you pick IDS, and then when you go into IDS and you select someone, you'd be able to see the DDP information. If you don't have been approved as an assessor, you haven't passed the test, you're going to get the read-only version. Okay. Again, you're going to have to renew your security affidavit yearly. If you change your name, please notify us, because oftentimes people change their names, they go to resubmit, they won't get it because we have you on an approved list under an old name or in a different county. Again, here's a link to review the security affidavit. I'm going to turn this over to Rick to go ahead and introduce the remaining video segments. And once we view those, we'll come back and wrap up with just a wrap up of additional slides regarding who to contact for assistance and so on.
Thanks, Brian. Again, as Brian mentioned earlier in the webinar, we wanted to make certain that everyone realized that the accompanying video segments were specifically recorded for the purposes of the ODDP training. Duplication or copying of any portion of this video for use outside of this training is prohibited. We can't express that enough. All right, there are 3 additional video segments that you're going to be watching, and in each of those video segments, the assessor is interviewing the individual and his supports in answering specific questions that are in the ODDP. So it's really important that you pay attention to the approach that the assessor takes and also how she engages the individual and that person's supports in getting those questions answered.
We're going to move to the section C, which is disability description. And this question here asks about your primary developmental disability. And there's a list of different developmental disabilities and some other things here. Would you like me to read down the list?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first one is mental retardation. The second is autism. The next one is cerebral palsy. The following is epilepsy or a seizure disorder. Then a learning disability, something like dyslexia. The next is a neurological impairment, something like Tourette's syndrome. And then the last is a traumatic brain injury. And John, do you know what your primary developmental disability is?
I don't know where.
Autism.
Autism.
Autism, okay.
That's the word.
Okay. And John, do you know if any of the other things on that list apply to you?
None.
Maybe Sadie or Joellen can help us too.
Right here.
Mental retirement.
Okay. Section E, sensory and motor information. And John, here, the first question is about your typical level of mobility and how you get along during the day. And I can see that you walk pretty independently.
Mm-hmm.
The choices here would be you walk independently, or you walk independently with difficulty, or you walk independently with a device and a couple of others. But I've been able to see that you walk pretty independently. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes? Do you have any difficulty in walking?
Nope.
All right.
No problem.
No problem.
Okay. And now the next question is about wheelchair use. Now we've just talked about that you walk independently, but do you ever have occasion to use a wheelchair?
Nope.
Nope. So I'm going to mark that you do not use a wheelchair. All right, we have another one here that's a series of tasks that I'll ask if you can do. Some of these I may ask you to use some of the things at the table here, and some of them we may just be able to know a little bit about you and know whether or not you can do them. Is that okay?
Okay.
The first one is if you can roll from your back to your stomach.
I can't do that.
You can't do that?
Nope.
These guys are laughing.
How come? And then you could roll over?
If you're laying on your back, can you roll over to your stomach?
I can't do that.
Oh, you can't?
Well, I kind of have to disagree.
Okay.
I've seen you roll from your back to your stomach and back over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Because sometimes it's hard for people to get up by themselves. So that's what they need to know. If you're laying in the bed and you want to roll over, could you do that? Mm-hmm. All right, that's what she's
I don't
asking.
think he likes to lay on his stomach.
No. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to mark yes on that one. Sounds like you can do that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And can you pull yourself to standing?
Yes.
You can stand up okay?
Yep.
All right. Do you walk up and down stairs by alternating feet from step to step?
I think the answer is absolutely positively yes.
All right. And, John, can you pick up that paper clip for me there? All right.
Absolutely.
And can you transfer that to your other hand? Magical.
Ta-da!
All right. Now, the next one is if you can mark with a pencil, crayon, or chalk. So I'm going to give you this notepad here, and you can choose any of these. They've got some pens, a highlighter, pencil. You could use this one if you like. And I wonder if you could maybe write something for me. If you want to write your name or...
And what?
Okay, I can read that. It says John Gillespie. All right. Now, the next one here, I'll switch you. Pair of scissors for a pencil. And I've got a piece of paper here. And I wonder if you could cut for me along that line there.
Oh. 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 Oh.
All right. Thank you, John. I'm going to flip to another section. It's the next section for cognitive and communication information, talking about how you communicate and how you understand things. And even though we've gone into a new section, there's still a bunch of yes and no questions here. So I'm going to keep going with those if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, actually, John, I've already seen you do one here, which is it asks if you can correctly spell your first and last name.
Uh-huh.
And I saw you do that on the last question. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and answer that as yes.
Yep.
All right. Okay, the next one talks about whether or not you know right from left.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the difference between right and left?
Mm-hmm.
Can you show me your right hand? Okay. Can you show me your left hand? Okay.
Which hand do you write with? Are you right-handed or left-handed?
Right-handed.
Okay.
So you're using your...
My hand.
Okay.
Okay.
And that one would be your...
Where's your left hand?
Right here.
All right. Thank you very much. And the next question is whether or not you can count 10 or more objects. Can you,
Find 10 things to count.
like if you,
10 cars.
yeah, do you see 10 things here? Can you maybe,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
You can just say, this is...
anything?
10.
10. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. John, do you understand simple functional signs? And by that I mean like a sign for a restroom or an exit sign,
Uh-huh.
stop signs.
Yes.
And do you recognize them all over? If you went to dinner at a restaurant and you wanted to use the restroom, would you know which one to go into?
Oh, the restroom.
But which one?
The men's restroom.
Uh-huh.
How would you tell that?
You go
By reading it?
by reading it.
Okay. And, John, do you do simple addition?
Yes.
Do you know 2 plus 2?
4.
4. Okay. And the next one is if you can read simple sentences. So I typed some up here. Can you read those?
This is fun. I like you.
You see how I get you to tell me you like me, John?
Yeah.
All right. And how about newspaper or magazine articles?
Mm-hmm.
Do you read those and understand them?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite?
Country music magazine.
Ah, the country music theme, huh? All right. And John, do you understand the meaning of no? Doesn't mean you have to follow it necessarily, but do you understand it?
Nope.
No?
If I said, John, no, we're not going to go there today, what does that mean?
We're not going to be going until tomorrow.
That's probably right.
Okay. And John, the next 2 questions are whether or not you understand one-step directions and two-step directions. And I actually asked you already to pick up the paper clip and then transfer it to your other hand.
Yeah.
So I've seen that you can do that, but I need to ask you if you feel that you can follow one-step and two-step directions.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. How about a joke or a story?
Oh, dear.
What about the Tennessee one?
You gonna
That
tell me a
sunburn?
joke
No.
or a story?
Your sunburn story.
Oh, I was swimming, and I was out of the pool for a few moments, and then when I went there, I went like Indian-like, and then I went to Sadie. Something's wrong with me, Sadie. I have a case of spontaneous combustion. And you know what they come up with? Alvera, and they cured me.
Yeah.
We learn
Bet
from our
your skin was
mistakes.
sort of red, huh?
Yeah,
And John, do you understand other jokes and stories? Do people tell you jokes?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you do answer yes or no to simple questions, which is the next question. You've been doing that for me all afternoon here.
Yeah.
Okay. And John, you've just related an experience to me. That's another question here. I asked you to tell about a story, and you told me about when you got sunburnt.
Yeah.
Yep. And you've told me a couple other stories today that I liked too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you tell a story.
Oh.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Look at this one.
Or TV show.
Yeah.
Tell her a plot from Friends.
My favorite show is Friends.
That's one of my favorites too.
Tell her the plot about Phoebe
Phoebe
and the babies.
and the babies.
Tell her about it.
We'll discuss that another time.
But it says right here to do that. You're going to tell one plot about your friend's show.
Because I like the show a lot.
Yeah, but
Oh,
tell
yeah.
a plot of your favorite show, though, about Phoebe and the little babies.
Yeah.
You want to say that one or another one?
No.
What about Monica?
She's a wonderful person.
But why don't you tell it? Because he memorizes all the shows, so
Ah.
I know he can do this.
Word for word.
Word for word. One with Monica. Tell one about Monica.
Forget it.
You don't want to do it?
No.
Not today?
Oh, I know another one you could do. The Jackie Gleason show.
Ryan the Kisser. Okay. Let's move.
Okay, we just wanted to go over some main points that we wanted to point out in the video segments that you just would have seen. The first one of those that comes to mind is as far as does John know the difference between his left and right hand? As you saw in the video, initially he incorrectly identified them, and then with some prompting from one of his supports, he was able to correctly identify his left from his right. For many of the people that would do the assessment, they might want to check either some background information on the individual, meaning some additional assessments, or maybe try to talk to John at a point without his support there to see if he really does know his right from his left. Some examples of misunderstanding what the question is asking. The assessor asked John at one point in time, can he roll from his back to his stomach? And in the video you notice that John is looking like he's attempting to roll while he's seated upright from his back onto his stomach, almost like he's trying to flip over, as opposed to if he was laying on his back prone to where he would roll over to lay on his stomach. So it's very important when you're asking questions to make certain that the person actually is understanding the focus of what the question is. So you may have to rephrase the question if up until that point in time the person seemed pretty comfortable with answering the question, but then their answer doesn't seem to fit in with other answers they've previously provided. Also want to talk about self-help skills. Supervision means that the person needs prompts to complete the task. This is different than just a reminder to do it. Also, as far as using language that the person understands, as far as you'll notice that John was using myself as opposed to independent. So it's important, if this is somebody new that you're working with, to get a good feel for the language that they use in responding to questions in general. The last point I wanted to bring up is there's one question which John does not allow the assessor to use input from others. It's a good example of the assessor letting John know what she or he will need to do follow up with before deciding on an accurate response. It basically said, maybe we can check with your sister. Brian, was there anything else that you wanted to add that were kind of sticking points with the video segments?
The only other thing that I would probably add was that, I think this was a good example of showing that the individual kind of does drive the interview to a certain degree, especially when he said, no, I think we're going to talk about that later. So the presenter took that as a key that, okay, let's go on to a different subject. So, at times if the individual says, no, we're not, don't want to answer that right now or whatever, the presenter in this case did a good job of, okay, then let's try to move on and not push the issue at that point in time. Okay, if that's all that you have to comment on with the slide, or the video, Rick, then we'll move on to the other slides. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. So as a wrap-up, what we want to do is go ahead and provide you with some technical assistance support links. If you need assistance specifically with the DDP and, say, specific questions with the assessment, advice on how to answer certain questions, you always have your instructions, which has a lot of additional guidance, which I think you'll see when you go through the face-to-face. But you also have the option to email the ddp.support email list. Both Rick and I, and we, as well as a few other people, follow up on those emails and get back with you and try to answer those questions in a timely manner. If you have request assistance to get onto the application itself, or the type of access that you have for the application itself, you would need to contact security.operations@dodd.ohio.gov. That's the security area. They can help make sure you get passwords, user IDs, that you have the correct access to get in for edit. They are the people who we let them know who's passed the test, and then they would go ahead and check that list before they would give someone edit access. So that's where that goes. So if you have those issues, that's who you would contact there. Again, you can always contact myself, Rick, who were both on this video conference, as well as our supervisor, Charlie Flowers, if you need any other assistance or guidance regarding the DDP. You can also contact your regional trainer, the person who you are going to be conducting the face-to-face with and going over the case studies. Those people, as going through part of the train the trainer, have agreed that they will be a resource for assisting people in answering questions, that they will also, of course, be providing the training to you, so you'll have another person out there, possibly in your county or in your region, that might be able to assist you. With that, we're going to end this session, and you will need to make sure that you schedule a time to be with a trainer to go through the case studies and instructions and then take the test. Please note that at that time you'll be signing in for that session, and you will have to indicate that you have initial or something to indicate that you have in fact watched this webinar, as this is part of the training. Rick, do you have any final points?
No, Brian, thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and end this, and good luck with the training and the ensuing test.